Hello, Internet. This is Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar, and welcome to a very special edition of the Rough Drafts podcast. This is something that I've been wanting to do since March 16th. That was when I decided I needed to fulfill a promise that I made to my grandma. My grandma was, so sweet. She's like, you know what? I never see anything about esports on television. And I watched this show called Bull, and they did an episode about esports. And I was just so excited because this was a thing that you did. And so she wanted me to watch it, and I did. And it was incredible in all of the wrong ways, and in a way that I could not help but fall in love with. And I brought on two people who I managed to convince to watch it along with me. Of course, Walter Ceades Fedczuk, my co-host here. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well, and I have to say I'm super excited to be joined by the star of CBS's Bull, Michael Weatherly. Michael, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Michael Weatherly, everybody, you were great as Tony DiNozzo on NCIS. Let me just put that out there.
Known fact. Matt, his pseudonym is Matt Galbraith. People don't always know that, but yes. It is a real thing. And how are you doing, man?
I'm living the dream.
Well, that's awesome. We're gonna talk about
actually dead.
Oh man, this is gonna be fun. This is an episode in which so many things were so horribly wrong as far as how esports were represented, and I can't wait to break it down with you guys. But I should start with the obvious question, which was, what was your expectation? I know, Matt, you saw me live tweet this at the time, but what were your thoughts, like just reading through that and then what, before you saw it for yourself, what did you expect from this episode?
Okay, so I actually watched Bull.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
I hadn't watched an episode since, look, I like Michael Weatherly. Hadn't watched an episode, since that normal December, January break that a lot of TV shows take, right? Where they don't air an episode for like 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
So having already known how they kind of like go about things in general, which is just like very inaccurate portrayals of pretty much fucking everything. I kind of, and then I saw your tweet where they were like, Titanfall 2 is the best game, the most popular game. Like, look, Titanfall 2 is a great game. Don't get me wrong. It is a great game. Definitely not going to get 70 million people to watch that shit.
No. It didn't sell particularly well, in fact. It seemed like it was one of those things where you could tell the marketing people were like, oh, what's a good number to throw out there that people could have watched? 70 million? Sure. Let's go 70 million.
They went heavy-handed on everything, though.
Yes.
Everything. But we'll get to that.
We absolutely will. Walter, what about you? What were you expecting? Because you don't have the same framework with Bull that Matt has.
Oh, absolutely not. And even when I saw Michael Weatherly was getting his own show, I was like, oh my god, finally! Like, he was fantastic on NCIS, and NCIS was obviously growing a little long in the teeth. He should have had a spin-off, ages ago. He should have been off that show 10 years ago, in all honesty. Mm-hmm. But the matter of the fact was, no, I don't watch network television. I really kind of abhor network television generally. It's not very fun for me. I've grown out of that phase, and I actually like things with a little bit more substance, Iron Fist notwithstanding. That being said, like, I really expected this to be more like, there's been NCIS or other network TV where they talk about, like nerd culture. There's, the famous episode of NCIS where Proby, whatever his actual character's name is like plays World of Warcraft or plays some other game, and they that's part of the entire episode. Like, I thought it was going to be a very microcosm and very micro look at it. I didn't expect off the bat 70 million people are watching this game. $20 million is being bet on this one game. Like, it was totally over the top, and it just was a super inaccurate portrayal when you're trying to. As an esports person, when I look at this, I want this to be someone's grandmother's first look at esports. Now I got to deal with somebody's grandmother coming up to me and going, do 70 million people really watch other people play video games? And I have to go, no, Grandma, it's not actually 70 million. It's probably more like 2 or 3 million. And occasionally we get a tournament that has, a big prize pool of, anywhere from, $2 to $10 million depending on the game. So
the total player base of League is about 70 million, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like 40 million 40 million players each month, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like and then 70 million accounts.
Yeah,
and they're like it's not like 80% are in China. So,
yeah. But
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like it almost feels like there's that. You know, when you ever talk to somebody and you're like, man, you won't believe how many cupcakes I ate. And they're like, oh, did you have like 30? It's like, oh, well, I mean, I had 12. I thought that was a lot of cupcakes. But now my numbers seem, like it's not that impressive. Like there was no need to say 70 million people were watching Titanfall 2. Just look at the League of Legends number, right? Worlds had, about 40 million people, including 17 million concurrent. That's still insane. That's still really impressive. You don't need to take it beyond that. It's the same thing with, I believe, Walter, you pointed this out to me because I missed it the first time. They said something like, yeah, their team is estimated to be worth $40 million. I'm like,
yeah.
What?
I could see if we were to pick what the biggest organization in the West is, I could potentially see if that org was selling their entire organization, like everybody, like say TSM or like who has
Fnatic
a good smite?
Fnatic is
Dignitas has a good.
Fnatic
let's
is probably
say
the
some
biggest
org like
organization.
Fnatic sells every team, maybe.
Like it's probably more like 20 million, I would think, for now.
Not anywhere close to 40 million. Maybe 20 if you were lucky. If you were really, really, really lucky across the board.
Or the teams in China.
China's an entirely different beast. Like, we're not talking about China. We're talking about, like, Western esports. And it's
Were you guys missing, like, it felt like there was an opening for some Chinese billionaire to come on in and do some fun shenanigans. And, like,
if the owner had been, like a side knockoff.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been hilarious. Like this super flamboyant dude just rolls in there. That would have been great. So it was
see, the problem is like super flamboyant dude would have been like, it's okay. Like it doesn't matter that you guys lost. Like whatever, it's all good. Like no, it needed to be this gritty white American businessman that it clearly he never made his money for himself. He inherited his dad's money. He's just this really, boisterous dude, really ham-fisted, kind of heavy-handed, named a building after himself. Like, it needed to be one of these kind of cutthroat American businessmen, not Psy. Like, for the entire plot construction to make sense of him, like, you lost one game, you must have...
Between golf weekends, then, and the presidency, how did Donald Trump get a chance to be the owner of this team, then?
I mean... Apparently, there's nothing.
Because you said you needed a really serious American businessman who has the audacity to put his name on a building. So,
I mean, this obviously the owner was Donald Trump Jr. That's all I'm saying.
It was pretty.
He even kind of looked like him. See, or wait, which Donald Trump is Donald Trump Jr. the one that looks like an extra in Blade?
Yes. No. He's the dark-haired one. He's the dark-haired one. The blonde is the other one.
Doesn't the other one literally looks like an extra from Blade? Like he'd be some like kind of like vampire in the back that just kind of gets killed by Wesley Snipes, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much about the way that they frame that side of things. But first, I want to talk about the portrayal of the event because that's the first thing. Like, okay, we're introducing the characters. We have our lead-in with our hero, whose name is Jace. He is the Titanfall 2 player. He's the #1 esports player in the world. They say a lot of times. I did not realize we had a consensus #1 esports player in the world, and that he's not Korean. That was also kind of interesting. Not a lot of Asian representation in a scene that's very heavy on that. But sure, whatever. We're getting to a guy that's essentially Dardoch here. Like
the Dardoch knockoff.
Yes. I mean, first of all, why wasn't like actual Dardoch or Riot Games in on this, right? Like, do you think that there was, that it would have been better for an esports company to try to shoehorn this in, or do you think that it was better for them to stay away?
4 months after Titanfall 2 came out. Like, what's the point of doing that product placement at that point? 4 months in first-person shooter games is like a decade.
Wait,
like, they're
but
on to
Matt,
the next game already.
But Matt, Jace had been the best player in this game for 6 years.
Yes. He had 118 and 12 record. Which
13.
is just...
13 is the owner likes to interrupt him as. 13 losses.
My
technically
apologies.
true. That's technically true, according to the plot. But
mean,
yeah, 6 years on this game that's been out for less than 6 months. Okay,
Yeah.
Activision. Whatever you say, buddy.
I mean, is that like a thing with the show, Matt? You say you watch. Like, is it set in the future? Is that because like
No.
I know like all the crazy tech they have with how they set up the jurors. Like, it almost felt like maybe they were going there.
No, a lot of it's very shallow, right? Even in their episodes, they're like about more normal cases. For one, somehow Bull always manages to like. He's like Sherlock Holmes. He pulls these inferences out of things that make no sense. At the end of a lot of the episodes, he'll actually solve the case and just like send the police to go. Like, there's an episode where they're trying to decide who murdered someone, and then Bull just kind of like tells the police at the end, like, "Hey, go to this house." Like, it's just like he inexplicably, like, he's supposed to be a psychologist that he figured out all like. I don't know the exact term for this, but there's a thing in writing, right? So. It's like the show will write into a plot hole, so they just magically give Bull some knowledge he doesn't technically have, and he just is like, "Oh yeah, I know this, and this is what happened." Like, it's very strange. And every character in the show is a knockoff of like another character that was in a previous show, like an NCIS, right?
Yeah.
You have like your nerd computer person who's like a really poor knockoff of what's the character from NCIS?
The Proby. That's all I remember him as.
No, the dark-haired girl, the cool one.
Abby.
Abby, yeah.
Abby, yes.
Yes.
Right. They have like a very poor Abby knockoff, which there's no one who could be Abby anyway, so why try?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just for people that have not watched this show, I think the AV Club summed it up best when they said that Bull is the TV equivalent of putting a Harambe t-shirt on your dad, which I just think was a kind of an interesting way to sum it up. It has all these different things, and they technically have been in other shows before, but they're just thrown together in this weird mishmash of a thing that just feels like a cheaper version of some of that stuff. I mean, Walter, what was the detail when you were watching the game itself and the way that they presented the esports event? What jumped out to you as the most egregious or strangest? What stood out to you?
The monitors were physically built into the desk, and they were like hovering, like they were looking down, like, here's my keyboard, and they're like looking down at their monitor, like, yo, listen, any physical therapist is just gonna cringe when they see that. Like, that's not how it's played. Even if you're like super lean back, like it's like going to the library, how that used to be. They had the undermounted monitors, and you just had the keyboard on the top, and like that was what you did, and it like killed your neck. I don't know if any of you are in like a community college ever, but that's how most of them build their desks for like their science labs, their like computer science labs and whatnot. It just like that totally blew my mind. And then when they're in the actual courtroom and they can play Titanfall on tablets. Woo!
Well, hey, no.
Are you kidding me?
You can't do that with the NVIDIA Shield?
I mean,
No.
if you
Titanfall's
can, I
on, like,
certainly don't think that.
Xbox.
I mean, they certainly weren't. I don't know how they were going to teach all of these jurors and the judge, which I'm sure is totally not biased of a thing to do, as far as how that will
It's
affect
the
the ruling.
IKEA effect.
And the judge is the one who's obsessed with his character's appearance.
Yeah,
I thought that was funny. He's like, I'm still my character creator.
and I'm sorry, but like, Titanfall 2 is a game in which you find a whole bunch of giant mechs. Like, how much does character creation really matter? I don't know.
Hey, you're talking to some Mass Effect fanboy here. Character creation matters.
That's fair. I didn't expect, like, when you watch the esport, right? Like, you're not, like, even, like, Rocket League has customization options, but I'm not watching to see, like, oh, man, I can't wait to see which car he pulls out here. Like,
Right, and the thing is, I guess my thing with that was, like, I glazed over they're playing Titanfall in there, because, like, Titanfall does have a PC port.
yeah.
I don't know if the NVIDIA Shield supports it. Hey, maybe it does.
Yeah.
Their tech person can hack the FBI, so apparently she can just put video games on tablets. I don't know.
I guess so. See, I'm surprised neither one of you. This was my favorite quote from the opening. This isn't an upset. This is the Patriots losing to Oshkosh High. Which, first of all, what's Oshkosh High? That, I think, really, I have so many questions about that. But second of all, how did this other team get to the finals if they're so bad? Like, I think someone put out, like, you know, when they get to the evil gambling angle, which I want to get into, especially with you, Walter, because we have Unicorn as a sponsor for our pod. Like, I thought that was...
it should have been 50-1.
That's
not a final! That's not a final! Are you kidding me?
No, this past Super Bowl set, was it the Super Bowl that or the conference final that the Patriots were in set the record for the highest? It was like what? I think the Patriots were 17-point favorite, something like that.
Something like
but
that,
like
yeah.
no one in their right mind is gonna make a 50-1 betting on a championship final. Like no, because obviously I see that in the Super Bowl. I'm just like, shit happens in the Super Bowl. Bullshit happens. Yeah. I'm gonna put like $20 on the team that's 50-1, and if they win, I win $1,000. They lose, I lost $20. Like what? They don't do odds like that.
It makes no sense. No casino would ever do it. You know, like it makes sense. Like that was the divisional round against the Texans, who had no quarterback. Like that, yeah. But by the time you get to the finals, like who was in this tournament? Like if Oshkosh High was the finalist, like who did they beat along the way? Like where there was a team of like 5-year-olds that was playing the game. I don't know.
I was gonna say there's Rainbow Meadow.
Even if they made like a Cinderella run, for example, right? They still are at the World Championships. It would almost be like a Brazilian team got to the finals by some stroke of luck, or TSM maybe.
Yes, that's I guess the level we're going for. But even still, I thought that was kind of crazy. Another thing that I noticed in that segment, right afterwards, when they, you know, immediately everyone jumps into he had to have thrown the game, which, you know, fine, that's the plot of the thing. That makes sense. We're getting into a defamation lawsuit for $20 million, which I thought was staggering. I don't know how $20 million of damages could have possibly been done in the way that the esports market works, but...
That was because the prize pool is $20 million. So I think he's suing them for the losses of the prize pool.
Right, but either way, it makes no sense. Because if he's suing him just for the losses of the prize pool, that wasn't why he was suing them. He was suing them because he had been blacklisted by every other team and he couldn't get a job. So he was suing for punitive damages based off of... Like, the entire legality and legal situation... I brought this up to Chase on the pre-call. Was like... The team owner approaches the player at one point during the lawsuit, and the kid's lawyer is standing there. The kid's lawyer will never, ever, ever let that team owner say a word to him. He will say, nope, get your lawyer. We'll talk about this in a conference room. We'll put everything down. Like, you're never going to let the person you're suing come up to you on the street and be like, yo, kid, what do you say? I just let you back on the team, and we a lawyer's never going to let that happen. And then the lawyer was like, oh, that's a win-win. We should take this.
Offers have to be official. Well, no, they're too busy having the female lawyer have some random, like, romantic thing full.
Yes.
For no reason whatsoever. Just so you know, she has not appeared in previous episodes. So it's not like there was some kind of, like, not that I'd seen. But I've watched every episode at that point. They hadn't met previously. There wasn't some backstory that you're missing because you've only seen one episode. She's never been in the show before. So it's not like there's some justification for them in this weird romance thing.
And she's in one other episode in that season, and that's 2 episodes later.
That's just... It makes no sense to me that because... Like, they do the whole, like, employee bit. It's very... Like, they immediately butt heads in a way that made it seem like they had history. So that's more confusing for me.
Sad, though? This show actually took a generous view of player rights.
Yeah, that's a very good point. At the end, they took a very generous view of it.
Like, he's in a position to actually sue like that, and, like, the players don't have this right now. Like, right. I would have almost liked to have seen them take a more serious look at that angle of the power disparity between the players and the owners, which you saw some of, because obviously he kicked the guy off the team and blackballed him, which is probably an accurate portrayal.
That's a very accurate portrayal.
Yeah, I mean,
the fact he turned around and sued him for $20 million is, and also, like, I'm sorry, if he's really the best player in the world, this is esports. Some owner somewhere is gonna be like, yeah, fuck you guys, I'm signing him.
Yeah, I'd take a flyer on the best esports player in the world.
Yeah. So Faker, Faker would throw. Faker's actually a really good example because Faker's like no one's ever would believe Faker would throw a game. Right. Because this is Leaks' life. If Faker for some reason got kicked off of SKT1, you're telling me that no team in the world is gonna sign him?
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
Unless there's undeniable proof that he did it, which there wasn't.
But again, even unless Riot banned him, I think a team still signs him.
Absolutely.
It was crazy because they even say at the very beginning, like, we have had hundreds of analysts breaking down the game footage.
Thousands of analysts and fans have watched this and have determined you didn't throw the game. There were just some unusual movements.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Reddit does have, like, if we're assuming 70 million people are watching this, I'm assuming this Titanfall 2 subreddit has, like, millions of followers, right?
It's got to be, like, 25 million.
So it's probably just Reddit trolls who are like, yeah, man, I watched this. You totally didn't throw it.
Yeah, I could see, like, this, like, the single lane streams that Riot does sometimes, like, just following, like, his player cam because he is the #1 esports player. And we'll get into some of the things about, like, streaming and how they handle that side of things, because I think that was kind of a notable absence. But
the only accurate portrayal of the actual, like, competition was probably the stadium. It was set up very much like Riot's transition to that like boxing style. Let's put a small stage and make it a little more intimate down there.
Yeah.
And that was probably the only accurate thing there. But you can't really fuck that up. So I want to know where they what stadium they rented.
Yeah, I don't think they rented anything. I think they just put it on a sound stage and CGI'd it. They didn't. I guarantee they didn't rent a stadium. They just used a sound stage. They had them come in the entrance and they had like bleacher seats set up. I will say, I think we all could agree the best part was when he challenged him to virtual golf. I was like, oh, I want to play Bethpage Black from the tips, and no one understands that reference, but like the most diehard of golf fans, I gotta say, Bull, I applaud that move. Like, make this kid the most arrogant. So it's golf courses. That's like considered one of the most difficult golf courses on the planet. Bethpage Black. It's a very difficult course.
See, my problem with that was it felt like the show was saying, well, it's not enough that he's just a really good player. He has to be good at something that our main audience is going to automatically give value. Like, we've accepted as a society that golf is something that people, play and are, they have a skill that we appreciate and can make a lot of money off of.
It's a rich white people sport. People like that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, here, we can justify rooting for this esports player because he's not just an esports player. He does this other super popular thing.
Only in a video game format.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
He still had to actually swing, though. He still had to actually swing, and even Weatherly's character. Is that realistic?
Games like that exist where you can hit the ball and it does that?
Yes, actually, yes.
I've seen them at like a PGA Superstore. I've seen those kind of simulations before when you want to try out new clubs. I'm not sure how accurate they are.
There's actually a place in a mall in Syracuse where they do that, where you go and you virtually golf and you actually hit the ball into a sensor on the wall.
Ball?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
It actually exists. It's kind of cool.
I haven't been to Destiny Ball in a few years, so. This is fucking huge.
Very fair. I do want to get back because we skipped over one thing that I think is this was possibly the most baffling thing to me. Okay. And it happens quickly, but it's still like MLG actively decided they wanted to sponsor this, which was just kind of crazy. Like, we had the MLG logo, like
Pause,
the official
timeout.
MLG.
Here's the timeout. Activision owns MLG and Activision owns Titanfall 2.
I understand that, but like, if you're going to have MLG and you're going to have reporters,
does MLG do anything anymore?
Some shooter stuff, it's not really as big a thing anymore. But
they run the Call of Duty World League.
Yeah.
Did they change the M to minor league gaming now?
No.
I mean, we're gonna. Those Call of Duty fans are gonna be in the comment section now. But I mean, the one line that I was like, they literally say everyone in the egamerverse at one point. Like, what is the purpose of having MLG on there and using that phrase, which my grandma then, like, she was trying to relate to me, so she used that, and I'm like, I'm so sorry they lied to you. But
I'm
like,
a gamer. I'm
like,
a gamer.
yeah,
I'm a gamer.
I'm a siren.
Oh! I was going to the ESL video, but
I mean, that works too.
I'm a siren.
I mean, what did you guys think about how they presented that kind of the media side of things in that angle? And I guess you could tie in the way that they treat the analyst character that some side character I didn't really care about has a romantic interest in later, that ends up making the big twist diagnosis at the end, which we'll get to. Oh God, we'll get to. So what did you think about the portrayal of the media, Matt? On that side?
That character specifically, I didn't like because he was the stereotypical, my entire life is video games and I don't sleep and I probably smell like shit and I drank 10 gallons of Mountain Dew last night. Like, and I'm surrounded by empty bags of Cheetos. That was his character portrayal, that like video games were his life. And I hate the fact that these shows, or like when like the BBC did that really bad esports special, like when they like, it's like they didn't even bother to do research, like at all. They just read something on the internet and were like, we're just going to run with this. Like they had no idea what the culture is like at all, which was kind of depressing. I mean, I will say this. I don't know who this is more of a comment on, but the person who's playing the media couldn't have been too much worse than Freak.
Man,
I
don't have
savage.
a counter argument, but yeah, wow.
But they didn't touch, like, literally the only interaction that the show has with anything outside of these 4 players and the owner is just, we have to show this exists. We have to show that this kid does this thing. But other than that, they don't touch esports. It's not, this isn't about, the show wasn't about esports. This was about an interaction between a player and their owner making some statement about him throwing it. Like, this very easily could have been a basketball show.
Right.
This very easily could have been tennis. This could have been anything. So it just seems like Activision got on the phone with someone over at CBS and said, listen, like, we just put out this new game. We think that this could be a really good way to get young people to watch an episode of your show and to maybe turn them into fans of their show. And this is also a good way to convince their parents to maybe pay attention to what they like and, possibly buy them a copy of Titanfall 2 because, it might be a good thing if, they show some interest in their kids' interests and buy them a game. And when they go to the store, they're going to remember this episode of Bull and go, well, that game was good enough to be on a TV show. I bet it's a really good game. So this wasn't about esports. That's the one thing that really bothers me about this and how, media, esports journalism kind of portrayed it, and the portrayal of the Elementary episode, which I don't know if that ever came out. Apparently Elementary was doing an episode of esports. Like, they're all pushing this narrative of, we have to be mainstream. We have to be mainstream. I'm just not of that mindset that we have to push esports into mainstream. All of us are getting older. We're all going to have kids probably. Well, not all of us, but we're going to have kids at some point in the next 10 to 20 years. Like, let it be gradual. Like, football did not become the most popular sport in America on day 10. It took a while, and it naturally grew, and the fan base naturally grew. I don't see why
It was baseball for most of the 20th century.
Exactly. Like, I don't get why we're trying to shove this down everyone's throats and saying we all have to accept that esports are a thing, especially when this is how you're going to portray it.
Yeah.
I bet Elementary's esports episode is probably pretty good. They tend to treat this stuff with a little more tact.
I think we might have a sequel podcast depending on how that goes. I now have my plan for after this. But to hit on your point, Walter, I agree with what you're saying, and I think that the part to me that pissed me off from that angle was when they portrayed the 65-year-old woman who rescues dogs from the animal shelter as a villain because she didn't get gaming. Like my grandma does not play video games. She tries very hard to operate her tablet so that she can watch Netflix. And she has a cell phone that's like a flip phone, and that's a thing for her to figure out.
Of slot games on her tablet.
Yeah, well, I don't think, no, she does. I don't think she's even at that level yet. But she's,
Oh, okay.
she's not, like, she's just not a tech person. But, she's trying to relate to me, and she was excited about this kind of thing. And the show portrayed this, this woman. It was like, oh, she doesn't like video games? Well, then she's evil and going to ruin our case. And I can't believe you didn't block her out. Like, it's just such a weird angle to take for that. Like, instead of, having people come in and give them reasons like, hey, like, this is, you don't have to love esports, but if you were, like, this is the thing that you would love about it, then goes on the other angle.
Every episode, they have this one juror where they decide to keep him even though they know it's going to be weird, because that's what gives the show plot. The entire show is around figuring out how to make that turn that juror. That's just how every episode is.
Yeah. It felt like that stereotype wasn't particularly fair, because I don't know if people within that age bracket can reasonably be expected to follow along with those kinds of things. Great if they do. And if any of them are listening to this pod, like, shout out to you. But I just thought that was maybe a little heavy handed, as was, Walter, you brought up the, how, this was a marketing thing rather than an esports thing. Direct quote, Titanfall 2 is electrifying. I think it's going to be the dawn of a new era in sports. Like, that was not particularly subtle.
Nothing about this episode was subtle, though.
Yes.
Nothing.
And another aspect that was not subtle, esports gambling. This was brought up. This was a potential villain. Yeah, Walter, you and I run a Guess the Lines esports betting podcast. So I'm going to turn this one to you first.
We do.
How did you feel about the esports gambling is evil angle that they shoehorned into this episode?
Fuck you. That's how I feel. That is blatantly how I feel, because this has just been an issue, period, across the board with any sport. We obviously, Pete Rose, the Black Sox way back in the day, like, gambling has existed for as long as sport has existed. Let us not kid ourselves. Gambling existed all the way back in the days of Rome, when they had men killing each other. People were literally betting with each other, saying, I'll give you 2 coin if this person beats the other person. Like, gambling and sports go hand in hand. And part of the problem of why gambling isn't so widely accepted, I think, comes from this same thing that alcohol isn't as widely as accepted, that there's this stigma that's attached to all these things, that, oh, it's not a good thing, it's a bad thing. And yes, gambling addiction is a utterly terrible thing, and it can ruin lives, and if you feel that you're a gambling addict, you should seek help, and there are a number of resources that you can do. But gambling gambling in and of itself is not evil. And I think this is just they tried to figure out the simplest plot device that they could do of, well, why would someone throw a game? Oh, gambling, they can make money off of it. I despised it. I really hated it, because it's demonizing this thing that esports gambling is in its infancy. It's in its infancy. It doesn't exist on this level. And this whole ham-fisted approach to overemphasizing on everything, now people are going to have this absolutely negative, connotation of, oh, people gamble on esports and they throw matches. The iBuyPower gambling scandal in CSGO was disastrous for those players' career, and very nearly could have knocked CSGO down at its core. Valve came in, they took a very firm approach to it, they kicked it in its knees. We're seeing constantly all these skin betting sites are now being knocked out because there is this connotation that comes from just this one real life incident, when there are a number of entities that are trying to legitimize it, because you can gamble on a football game, you can gamble on the Patriots against the Denver Broncos.
And for the record, like, why did it have to be offshore betting accounts? Like, that was also a weird thing where it's like, oh, this is seedy underground gambling is where all of this happens.
Happening in furniture warehouse basements. Like, are you?
Because the primary demographic of esports definitely has access to that shit. Right? Yes. All those 14-year-olds who are dying to be faker are definitely betting through offshore banking accounts. Like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, the thing is, like, gambling in esports is pretty tame, really. Like, that was a big hullabaloo for esports, but the amount of money involved was like negligible. Like, it's not like it's not a thing. It's like in gambling with I love gambling. I live in an area in upstate New York that's huge thoroughbred horse racing.
Yep.
Right. So my summer job was at that racetrack, and it's a famous racetrack across the country. Right? Saratoga.
Saratoga, yeah. A classic. I've been there. It's a beautiful track.
Right. So I mean, you have the 3 Triple Crown tracks, and you have Saratoga in New York and Del Mar in California, and those are like the prestigious tracks in the United States. And it's got this negative connotation to it, and it's really kind of like, no one's gonna be like, "Oh, you bought a lottery ticket. How shameful of you!" Like, I don't. It's just strange when you're betting on like. And here's the angle, right? You know what stops issues of players gambling on themselves? And this would have been an interesting tactic to get to. And if they'd done this, I would have been okay with the gambling.
Mm-hmm.
Why is a player betting on the game they're playing?
That's a very good question. I mean,
why did the Black Sox players bet on the game? Because they weren't being compensated fairly for their play.
Whereas here,
if they wanted to go, maybe just give it a little more depth by saying, "Hey, something shady," because shady things happen in esports with compensation. If you want to do one thing that's realistic to the industry, focus on shady things happening with player compensation, because that's definitely a major issue, and it still is.
Yeah, and funnily enough, like, they make a comment at one point about the gaming house having, like, what was it, one bedroom, I believe it was? What was there was some crazy thing about, like, the house being super cramped or whatever that they could have gone into. And, right now we're having a controversy with Tainted Minds over in Oceania where they didn't fulfill their contract. And these players were having to live in a place where there's, like, dirt all over the floor and there was no air conditioning.
Right, but that's Oceania. We're in the West with an esport that's supposed to have 70 million people watching it. And you're telling me they're living in one room?
Right? It was
no.
crazy.
So if the team is caring that much, they're having sports psychologists, they have chefs, they have every type of specialist they would want. Like, NFL teams have specialists for the weirdest shit.
Yes.
So like, if it's really that popular, you're telling me they're not gonna have studied like the optimal amount of sleep and all that stuff, and sleeping conditions, and diets, and they're gonna be sleeping in like a room, like one.
And this is why when they have that tone deaf, like the owner does the whole, they should be playing me when he's up on the stand. It's like,
that was
what? Like, at the point where it's become this, if it's that mainstream and it's been that solidified, how is that owner still someone who's relevant in this day and age? It made no sense.
It's an accurate portrayal of an owner at a team that's not worth $40 million.
Right. And
those owners existed.
Yeah.
They did.
Those owners still exist. I had to, like,
but not...
like, I worked with a crappy owner when I was working in Turkey. They still exist, and it's still a thing. And you could have got into that, but instead they blew, by over accentuating the details earlier, they put themselves in this corner where it no longer made sense.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, and to come back to the gambling point, it just makes all of that seem really tone deaf as well, right? It's just, in an age in which we're talking about the Las Vegas Raiders potentially becoming a thing, and we have all of these legitimate ways to gamble on esports and engage in that,
and commissioners of major sports leagues actually willing to broach the idea of legalizing sports gambling.
Yeah,
Silver in the NBA thinks that's a good idea. Is it Manafort, the guy, commissioner of baseball?
Yeah, Manafort.
He thinks it's a good idea. He's thinking. Here's the thing. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
It happens a lot. You might as well legalize it and make money off it.
Exactly.
It's America.
Exactly.
It's America. That's what we do. We legalize things and we make money off of them.
The problem with a sports league, like the NFL or Major League Baseball, doesn't have to come out and openly say, gamble on our sports. They don't have to do that, but they at least have to acknowledge it, and they need to say, this is a thing that exists. We can either stay completely hands off of it and demonize it, and leave ourselves no wiggle room to operate with it and to try and set regulations and to try and make sure that our players understand the full implications of what happens if you partake in it. Or they can integrate themselves into it. Again, not outwardly saying, you're a Bills fan, go gamble on your Buffalo Bills when they take on the New York Jets this weekend. Not like that, but have, a person that their sole job is dedicated to, okay, what are the rules and regulations that our players need to follow? What are the rules and regulations that, the casinos need to follow? How do we make sure that we don't cross paths and we don't have another Pete Rose or a Tim Donahue or a Black Sox incident? Like, just openly demonizing it, saying that this is a bad thing and we shouldn't touch it, when everyone else kind of looks at it and goes, well, yeah, but we kind of enjoy it sometimes, is what happened with Prohibition, and we all know how that turned out. If this was really the angle they wanted to go for it, they shouldn't have started out with Bull and his people finding somebody had some bets that had, it shouldn't have been brought up until the owner says, we're in the middle of a contract negotiation. He wanted more money. And then all of a sudden you get this context of, well, maybe he bet on it. Maybe he, and that's your argument of, oh, he's underpaid. He's underappreciated. He needs more money. That's when then you get into the gambling angle. That's when you find out, oh, there was this large offshore bet that they never, ever touched again.
Well, that's not true. They did. Did you at the very end? And we'll get to it.
At the very, very end.
And it was so shoehorned and came out of nowhere. But, I mean,
didn't pick up on that, actually.
Yeah. We'll get there. I want to talk about the ending in a little bit, but I just, one last thing on the gambling side of things. We love working with Unicorn as our podcast and a proud sponsor of our show. The amount of work that they have to do to fit all of the regulations, both in this country and in Europe and everywhere else in which they operate, to make sure that all local laws are followed, to make sure that everything is very, strictly regulated. It's just insulting that instead of letting those kind of places exist and showing that there is this handle on the scene, they just portrayed it as this Wild West. And I thought that was very unfair. I want to, before we get into the ending,
we missed a few things, I think, too.
Well, what do you want to hit? Because I was going to just ask, what are the things that stood out to you as crazy?
Token female gamer, who, of course, has to have a crush on the Dardoch knockoff star. Right?
Yes.
So, and it's very strange because they're trying to be progressive. They're trying too hard. We're going to put a female gamer on this team, even though no top pro teams have female gamers because they just don't want to, one, the player base isn't not necessarily there, and two, they don't want to risk, they don't want to risk that. Or they don't want to deal with the lawsuits that might happen if some guys, it's a bunch of teenagers living together. The teenage guys living together. They're probably gross. Let's be real here. So I hated that narrative that they make her have a crush on him, and then the weird thing where he has her lie for him to fake the
headache. She's like, I had a headache. It's like, at the very least, come up with a better lie. That's the worst lie that you could possibly come up with. Yeah, oh God. I mean, they might as well have said I just
so many realistic issues too that they could have gone with, which we will get into with the twist ending, because there's a lot of realistic things they could have brought up. They're actual accurate to esports. They could have caused a detriment in performance. Yes. So I'm really not a fan of the token female gamer who has a crush on and also this really giddy over the top camaraderie and this it was very strange. I was not a fan of that part at all.
I'm just not a fan of in general how the show treats women, because the main characters, there were 3 separate incidents where they're clearly doing romantic interest angles. The first being the female player, which I thought was just unnecessary, completely unnecessary.
The shallow girlfriend. Forgot about the shallow
girlfriend. Well, yeah, there's the shallow girlfriend who I don't know why she was included at all.
Chicks dig elo, man.
Other than there has to be, it's just more mainstreaming of girls date, video game players, whatever. The use of female employees to get information or to make men do things for them to help in the investigation in terms of getting the gambling data from the FBI, and then the female with the over-the-top I'm addicted to video games person that the show absolutely had to. The moments between the actual lawyer and Bull, the obvious other blonde character that's playing the original director from NCIS and is tangentially there to be a long-term love interest for Bull. Just the way they treated women just really...
think she's there for that, actually.
That's how it came off to me, was that she's supposed to be his grounding force.
They don't actually have any, like, because again, I've watched the entire. They don't. They're definitely like platonic.
Okay.
I think, but again, it's only the first season, and we know that these CBS shows play the long game.
Yeah. Funnily enough, when researching for this show to get ready, I looked up yesterday. Literally yesterday, when we were recording this, March 23rd, Bull was renewed for a second season. So perfect timing, really, at the end of the day. But yeah, no, I agree. That was a problem. It felt like they're just every female character had to in some way tie back to a man, which was
it's Michael Weatherly. Like, I kind of understand. He's a chauvinistic dude. Like, so obviously women are second-rate characters when he's around. It's not his fault, but he's just, man, his chin and his charisma is just unyielding.
Oh, that makes sense, because the Rotten Tomato review is Michael Weatherly's performance is top-notch, but not enough to save a show that relies too heavily on a well-worn series of legal show tropes and off-putting premise.
Nailed it.
Yeah, that's literally what this is. Yeah, that was so the female stuff was awful. What else stood out to you guys? Because we could go through every bit of the case, but we'll be here for forever because almost every detail ended up being wrong. What were kind of give me like the most egregious things that stood out to you that were just immediate, like that makes no sense, that detail doesn't add up to the ending?
Was we're going to prove that he's psychologically incapable of losing.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Well, someone who loves the game would never throw it for money. I'm like, what if you love the game and money? I don't know. Like, that seems like
you're obviously a winner because you.
If you can't handle losing, then you're never gonna get good at video games. Because solo queue, man, holy shit.
I mean, again, going back to the thing, he's like, I knew you were incapable of losing when you double. Where's the guy that was double or nothing on virtual golf just so he could win? Like, which is kind of getting almost a spoiler, but like that is not a legal defense. That is like an insanity plea. That is like, well, we're gonna prove that you didn't do it by proving you mentally are incapable of reasoning to do that.
But that's the thing with the case. No, there's no way to prove. Like, so how are you gonna prove that he threw the case on purpose? Well, I mean, he threw the game on purpose, right? There's like no way to prove that, right? It's so the entire case made no sense in the first place because.
I mean, it's not like he was this undefeated player, right? He went 118-12, so he lost 12 other times, before this game. So did he get brought to court every time? Like, yes. Was this a thing where the owner constantly was like, "Look, man, you're on thin ice. If we lose another one, I'll know for sure that you're secretly trying to throw the game to make more money on the next contract," which I thought was interesting. I'm trying to figure out how...
Instead of just winning and getting that massive prize pool.
Yeah! Like, what was the... Like, wouldn't you make more money if you won and then threw yourself out on the open market at the very least?
Yes, like, but he has a 3-year non-compete clause, and we know that there's probably a right to first refusal clause in that contract, too, since there's a goddamn non-compete clause.
God. Yeah. That was silly.
That's heavy-handed even for esports contracts.
Non-competes were really common up until probably season 4, and that was when lawyers actually started looking at them and started making teams take them out. You could really look at like Bryce Bloom as probably one of the guys that once he really started getting into it, when contracts slowly started to chip away at some of these really egregious clauses in them.
Yeah, and shout out to the guys that do that, but it's just another example of like, look, you could have gone with the realistic modern day. Some of these things are still waiting to be formed, and therefore there are problems, and that's how we get to where we are, and why these plot points make sense. Or you could have everything, blow up and have the 70 million number and everything go crazy, but then you have to change the problems accordingly. You can't say, yeah, this team's worth $40 million, but they also don't understand how to handle any of these little details and have all of these things that no player would ever sign on to in an industry that's making that much money. Like, if there's that much money in the scene, why would they sign a contract with a non-compete clause? It makes no sense. They would never need to. There's so much money in this.
Because he signed the first contract when he was 19. He got stuck with this owner. This owner kept putting terrible contracts in front of him because he couldn't go anywhere else or give up the game that he loved.
I mean, sure. If they'd got into that, maybe. I mean, I don't know, man.
It's only a 45-minute show. Like, they can't get into all the nuances of esports. That would just be incredible. It'd be crazy.
But they could have gotten into maybe one.
Yeah.
You're telling me that a shallow, quick look at overinflated numbers isn't the best thing for esports? Aw, that's adorable.
I'm just trying to figure out why the show decided that having the death sounds when they were playing the game in the lobby with all the lawyers, their side character thing, and they have the Wilhelm scream when the guy dies, like the like what? Why did you need that? Like, there's actual voices that the announcers have.
3-man multiplayer on one screen with no split screen.
Why didn't Activision, Activision picked Titanfall to be like, all right, so Activision and Blizzard are it's Activision Blizzard. It's one company, right? Yeah. They have WoW, they have StarCraft, they have Diablo, they have Hearthstone.
Because they don't want to damage
Heroes of the Storm.
If it goes badly, they don't want to damage one of their IPs that actually make them money, like Call of Duty. That was why. They were trying to use this too as a Hail Mary to potentially prop up Titanfall, but if it failed, oh well, it's just Titanfall.
I guess.
I guarantee you that's what the marketing meaning was, well, why don't we just do Call of Duty? Everybody knows Call of Duty. Yeah, but if this goes badly, we're going to get crucified by all the Call of Duty players. And we can't really use any of Blizzard's titles because they're a little too complex for people to understand. Why don't we use Titanfall? That thing's lagging in sales, and you know what? If it goes good, it might bolster them. If not, who cares? It's Titanfall.
Yeah, Hearthstone would have been a much better choice because people understand the card game thing.
Yes.
From Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon and Magic.
But again,
poker and just poker, which is on ESPN already. But, that would have been that would have maybe been an even better way to handle the gambling side of things, right? Because that's
100%.
You could look at that. That's much more easy to break down.
But how does he make a mistake that leads him to throwing a game? That's the problem. Is it has to be a team-based game.
It's pretty easy to make suboptimal plays in Hearthstone. As someone who is not necessarily the best at Hearthstone all the time, it would be very easy for a pro player to not play to their outs.
But then, spoiler, how do you conclude that it's Parkinson's?
I mean, are we getting
Yes, we're going to ruin this for everyone. It's fucking Parkinson's. They decide he has fucking Parkinson's by looking at 5 minutes of fucking gameplay. It's House MD in this shit. I was waiting for Hugh Lowry to pop out.
It could have been a wrist issue or something like carpal tunnel or something. They had to go all the way to fucking Parkinson's.
My first thought was what do you think those lawyers would have thought with the footage if they'd shown Dignitas versus Renegades? Just when they suicided under the tower? It's oh my god, they're all suddenly brain dead for a second. That's crazy. We gotta send them to a hospital fast.
Guys, that's just how they are. Stop being mean.
Oh my god. It's I mean, Matt, we'll start with you on this. Why do you think they went this route? Is there any I'm just trying to wrap my head around it because it just seems like such a baffling thing to do, to have it be, yes, we had all these thousands of people watch game footage, but this one guy accurately diagnoses Parkinson's.
Because CBS shows are watched by a bunch of old people, and the only people that are going to still be scared by Parkinson's is old people who actually remember Parkinson's being a thing.
Yeah. You're not...
Right?
Yeah.
Plus, it's not as dramatic to say, you have carpal tunnel syndrome. You have a debilitating neurological disorder that might kill you in 30 years.
and his only concern, by the way, that he ever brings up is about his esports career. He's I can't play anymore. What am I going to do with my life? It's
this gets out, my career's ruined.
and Bull is there's drugs and treatments you can play for another few more years, and they're just yeah, we won't worry about whether you're gonna fucking die later.
It seems like that would be a thing. I mean, Walter, is there any I mean, what did we think this ending was gonna be? Like, let's rewrite this for a second. How do we do this in a way that, you know, gets an ending where Jace can get back to the team? Because that was clearly how this thing had to end, right? Is that he had to go back to his teammates. They had to get the gang back together again, because when they did the interviews with the players earlier on, they talked about, well, the team will never be the same again and all that stuff. So we knew that would had to happen. But how do we get there? What's the way that you do this and accurately, you know, at least try to portray esports in a way that makes some coherent sense?
So if it was so easy to figure out whether because the spoiler, it turns out it was another guy trying to throw the game.
Right.
So how come they didn't figure that out until at the end of this lawsuit? Like if thousands of people were analyzing this video and it was so easy to tell that he was cheating, so you could just tell by watching the video for 5 minutes. Like, that was just a huge, like, because I'm a writer as well, and that's just a huge fucking gaping plot hole that Bull, with 5 minutes of watching this other dude play, picked up on what thousands of professional analysts couldn't on someone else's play.
Right.
Like, seriously.
So here's how you rewrite it. I got the ending for you. Okay. So redhead dude, Mendel, he's the bad guy here.
Yes.
So Mendel's the one who at the end of the game they find out he's the one who really threw it, because they look back over his play and find out. Oh, but everybody's been focusing on Jace. So
Yes.
what it is that Mendel replaced Jace's mouse that had a computer program on it that intermittently sent a movement command through the mouse that Jace wasn't doing, and it just was intermittent. And it just happened to be at that one moment, and that was Mendel's failsafe for him subconsciously doing it. And people would look at Jace because Jace is a star player, and Mendel would get away with it. That's how you do it. It's still kind of convoluted, but it's not fucking Parkinson's.
Well, and you know what's funny is it actually ties in, like, either the episode before or 2 episodes beforehand, they dealt with, the episode is about a company developing self-driving cars. Mm-hmm. So they could have tied in the same type of hacking, and the self-driving car got hacked.
Okay.
So they could have tied in the same type of thing where the mouse got hacked, or like this program thing. Like, they could have made it would have made sense in the context of the last few episodes. But the thing is, Bull never ties episodes together. It's not like NCIS. It doesn't have an overarching arc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a shame, right? Because, I mean, you hit it on the head. I think that any sort of, you know, scripting, like weird, you know, bugs within the game, like there's so many things that you could do. There are so many things that people already do to try to get an advantage or maybe a disadvantage in this particular case. And it just seemed like, you know, maybe they were just afraid that, you know, going all in on that technical side of things for, you know, a second episode, and especially in a video gaming thing where they're already trying so hard to make the plot, hey, this is why you should love gaming, specifically Titanfall 2, because if you played it, you'd love it, buy it today. Like maybe they just thought that would be like a negative note, but it felt so forced. It really felt like, you know, at the very least, did we need the other player to be throwing the game at this point? Like, if we're going to go Parkinson's, like, first, terrible idea. But if you're going to do this, why do we need someone else throwing the game? Why? Like, we don't need both. Like,
because they had the gambling angle. Come on, dude.
You could cut that for literally anything else. Like, any amount of background into, like, some of these other players or something about, you know, the scene as a whole. Like, wouldn't it have been interesting if we even heard anything from the team that beat them, right? Because don't they have, like, they were in game. They, you know, someone at an enemy team would be able to say, like, yeah, like, it was weird that this happened because we've played against him before and we know that he usually does this instead. Like, that would have been something.
So here's the thing. What Bull attempted to do is, like, Bull is, like, on their second date with their girlfriend here. And they said, oh, I know how to cook. And Bull is really, really good at making, let's say he makes a really, really good pork chop. Like, really good pork chop. It's really good. But, like, he makes a pork chop and he'll do, like, some steamed rice and, like, a packet of, like, steamed veggies. Like, that's really it. But it's a really, really good pork chop. But Bull doesn't think that's going to be enough to impress this girl. He's like, no, I got to show her I can make like a full 8-course meal. So he makes everything, just like everything. He makes like, au gratin potatoes, and he gets fresh broccoli and tries to do some like bacon, onion, broccoli type dish, and he makes like a soup, and he makes a cake. And because he does all these things he's not really good at, he's not able to spend enough time on the pork chop. So the pork chop is like a little overcooked. He didn't season it quite right. It's just not as good as it normally is. So he spread himself super, super thin, and therefore didn't do the one thing that he was really, really good at, which is basically you could have picked any of these topics and done one, just focused in on that one topic and had that been the center of everything. It could have been the ownership, having all this power angle over the player. And maybe it was the owner, if you want to keep the gambling angle, it's the owner that did it, and he, spiked the kid's drink before he went, and that's why he had a headache. Or you could focus on one, maybe a second minor little detail, but instead Bull was like, we're going to talk about everything related to esports except streaming, which is literally what Bull should have said is like, well, doing this, I've been researching, esports. Why don't you just become a streamer? Like, I get you're super competitive, but, you could just go be a streamer, and that's not the end of your career. Like, that was the one thing that they didn't touch on, which I have now researched online. Elementary's esports episode has already come out. It came out towards the middle of February, and it's centered around an ex-pro being murdered live on camera. So if you want to go watch that episode, it's called Wrecked in Real Life, and it's episode 14 on Season 5, if you want to go watch that Elementary episode.
I feel like we might have to, Walter, and depending on how good it is or how bad it is, we might have to do this again. I'm just thinking, like, if you're an esports fan and you listen to our podcast on a regular basis, I think this is so bad it's good. Like, check it out. It's not free on CBS anymore, unfortunately, at the time we're recording this, but you can absolutely find it online. I'm sure that if you're listening to this and you're an esports fan, you already know where to find these kinds of things. But yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it up. Unless anyone has anything else to add. So, thank you so much, Matt, for joining us on the show. Where can people find you and the stuff that you do?
Twitter, if dare.
What's your Twitter handle?
It's SuperbianMG. Then Superbia is my actual slide, and then with the pen, then MG. There it is.
There you go. And Walter, where can the nice people at home find you?
As always, you guys can find me at Ceades_LOL.
Awesome. And I'm at RedShirtKing. Thank you guys so much for listening. We are going to try to do, these kinds of movie, television stuff. We really enjoyed doing the Logan review. I think this was a lot of fun. Thanks again, Matt, for coming on. And next time on the podcast, we should be doing week 10 of the EULCS previews on Wednesday.
North American Challenger Series.
Yeah, we have the relegation tournament previewed on Thursday, so be sure to check back in for that, guys. And until next time, bye, Internet.
Hey there, Ceades here. Thanks for checking out the podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/roughdraftspod. For just $1 a month, you can join your fellow listeners in our patron-only Discord channel and help keep the content coming, or join our VIP club where $1 a show or $8 a month gets you first priority on all patron content like our patron-only Q&As. And check us out on all of our social media, Twitter @RoughDraftsPod, Facebook.com/RoughDraftsPod, SoundCloud.com/esportsroughdrafts, as well as on iTunes and YouTube by just searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.